Good day and welcome to Gathering Conversations. We're here at the beautiful Ben Franklin Community Garden in the Master Gardeners of Cuyahoga County demonstration area in the Old Brooklyn neighborhood. And today we're going to talk a little bit about fall container gardening. A couple weeks ago we went through the garden and looked at some of the containers that were planted out for the summer months. Those sorts of containers are plants that we want to look beautiful and very nice and colorful over the summer. We make the choices on the plants that we put in those containers based on the season. We have summer annuals such as petunias that aren't going to look very good in the fall. They're going to look kind of yucky and deadish, if you will. We have succulents that might be there for different parts of the area that are going to be a little drier during the summer months. And some of the things that we look at as far as our fall containers are going to be a little different. Those are going to be plants that are going to be cool tolerant, right?
Right.
And Marge, I see you have a number of plants that you purchased here. Can you tell me what you have purchased?
Well, I have a variety of things that admittedly I pretty much went by the color that I wanted to have by my door as I came in and out. Some years I've used the geraniums from my spring or my summer pots and used them and just changed up what I had planted with them. But I thought I would do something a little different this year and see if I could create something for the fall and then carry it into the cooler, more winter-like temperatures. So I have a nice purple mum that I kind of chose as my main coloration. I have some flowering kale and flowering cabbage. Some pansies just to give a little more variety. And then the rest of these over here are for cooler zones, zones 4 through 6 predominantly. And these might carry better into the winter months. So the spruce, some heather, some euonymus, and some coral bells. All of these things I could also transition into my yard for future.
Exactly. And I just love the amount of texture, the different heights that you have there available to you. Now you talked about taking one of your geraniums and putting it into your fall container. Now one thing we want to talk about is reusing your containers. Now it's important at the end of the season that you empty out your containers if you're not going to carry it into the fall. For example, this is a container that may have been used earlier in the year and it is a little soil filled. So you want to make sure that you're getting all of that old soilless media out of there. So you're going to clean it out and then you're going to take a 10% bleach solution, you're going to clean it out and then you're going to set it out to dry. You could also then rinse it again just to make sure all that chlorine is off of the pot. But you want to make sure you're starting off with a clean container, such as the two containers that you have here. I also noticed that you have right here a nice lightweight plastic container. And this one right here is a terracotta container. It's a little bit heavier. Now we consider this a non-porous container, and this one's going to be a more porous container because it'll hold a little bit of water. But one thing I like that I see at the bottom of both of the containers is you have drainage holes. Now, why is that important?
Well, you want the water to drain through so that your plants aren't sitting in water. My grandmother used to say, don't let them have their feet wet all the time. So
exactly. Plants are very susceptible to root rots, so you want to make sure that whatever container you're using does have drainage. Now this one only has one hole, as we showed a little bit earlier. So what you could do in this situation is put a little gravel to give it on the bottom to give it a little extra drainage. This one I can see you put about 4 holes in, and that's very important to have that good drainage. So which container are we going to use for?
I think I'm going to go with the lighter weight one.
Okay.
I thought it was a little deeper, so it will give the plant's roots a little more protection, and a little wider, so I can stuff more plants into it. And yeah, it'll be lighter.
And we're going to go ahead and take a soilless mix. Now this soilless mix has peat, perlite. It has a little bit of fertilizer, and it also has a little bit of limestone. The reason it has lime is because peat is very acidic, and adding of the lime keeps the pH at the appropriate level for plants. Should we put in a little bit more?
Well, I guess we can.
Okay. Now, Marge, you're very creative, so I'm going to let you figure out how you're going to arrange those plants in that pot.
All right, well, sometimes what I like to do is just go ahead and take them out of the pot and sort of set them in here to see how things are going. So I'm going to start with my mum.
And you start with that one because it's the biggest.
Yes, it's the biggest, and I'm considering this my focal point.
Okay.
And I like to spread the roots just a little bit. So I'm just going to set that there right now. And this will give us a little height and some different texture. I love the way these leaves spread out and are kind of spiky. This one, pretty well root bound, so
Oh goodness, look at that.
I
Good
usually
idea,
just
pull those off.
pull that off, get it out of my container. And again, I'm going to loosen this up a little bit.
I'd say I loosen it up a lot.
It's not being very cooperative. There, got that.
You'll notice this flowering kale isn't nearly as root bound as the others.
Right.
So you don't have to break it up as much, but you do still have to break it up.
Okay, and I think we'll tuck that sort of in the front here. And then I always like to have something trailing down. So this little ivy that's variegated gives us some different color, breaks up all the green that we've got going. And this one too is very loose. You can set that in there. I'm going to move this
Very nice.
kale over here. And then I thought a couple of these pansies would be nice, just to add a little bit more color here and there. And these will also sort of spill over the container, which will help draw the eye down. Get a little pop of yellow over here. And maybe one more. This darker purple or hot pink. Put that in there. Okay. So give it a little look. Seems pretty good.
Okay.
Okay, and then we'll just want to get these tucked down in so that they're nice and firm, standing up nice and proud. And then we can backfill with a little more soil. And for this, I'll just grab some handfuls.
Now, one thing to know, the fall is kind of an unusual time of the year. Well, I should say our weather's been very unusual all this time this year. But you can have really, really warm days, you can have really, really cold days. So your plants need to be plants that can tolerate those extremes. And you also want to make sure that you're watering appropriately. Still, even though it's the fall, you're going to have to check it to make sure that it's not dry. If it's windy, the plants will dry out a lot faster and you'll still have to water it. So this container will probably be appropriate through end of October. Okay.
I would say.
Some of these plants are plants that will at that time begin to decline because they aren't incredibly cold tolerant. So let's talk about some of the plants that we can then change out.
Well, some sort of evergreen is always nice, especially by my door. It kind of reminds me during the cold winter months that there's hope, spring's coming, and I like to see the green. And similarly with the euonymus, this would be a nice change out for the variegated ivy that we have in here. And this is a perennial and will last. The heather is nice, again, a pop of color. It won't be quite this vibrant all during the winter, but it will still be nice and add some different texture. And likewise, the coral bells. So while we've lost some of the more summer-like blossoms of the pansies, this still is a very nice colorful mix for the winter garden.
Still staying with the greens and the purples, very nice. One thing to notice, as Marge had mentioned, at the end of the season when you're finished with some of these plants, you can take them out, plant them back into your garden. Fall is a very good time to plant perennials. We can also leave the larger ones out or the more cold tolerant ones out all winter long.
Right.
However, they may decline depending on what sort of winter we have, so we need to be cautious of that. One thing to note, the non-porous pots can stay out during the winter, but the porous pots should probably come in because they can crack if it does get cold enough. What are some other things we should know about container gardening?
Well, you do have to water. You may have a dry spell, especially during the earlier fall, but you also need to be careful not to overwater.
Exactly, because like you said, you don't want to have wet feet.
Right.
The other thing is to make sure once the leaves have declined to pull off the leaves until the plant is completely finished out. And once again, always make sure that it's getting enough sunlight. Even though we're getting into the cooler part of the year where we're using plants that tend to be a little less light needy, they still do need light, particularly to keep the color. So, beautiful.
Thank you.
Love it.
Thank you. I think that'll be nice by my door.
So now joining us for What's Hot on Hotline is Master Gardener Darren Croft, and he's going to tell us a little bit about the questions he's hearing out in the community.
We've had a lot of questions on Hotline and also at a couple other places where you can find Master Gardeners. On Saturday mornings at Shaker Market, Saturday afternoons at Botanical Garden. We have Master Gardeners all over the place. So look in your local paper, your local newsletter, and you'll find us. But no matter where we are, most people are really wondering what they should be doing this time of year. You know, the season's winding down for a lot of the vegetables, but people, I think, have a sense that there are things that they should be doing out in their garden beds. Can you explain a little bit about putting the garden to bed for the season?
Exactly. So I would agree with you that folks are just kind of tired. This was a very difficult year, and I keep getting these calls, was this normal? And it was normal for this year. We don't know what next year is going to bring. But at this time, if you are ready to close down your vegetable garden, the first thing you want to do is take out all the old plants. You also want to make sure you take out all the stakes and you clean them off. Take out any string or wire that might be on the ground as well. You want to make sure you pick up any fruit or vegetables that have fallen onto the ground that you accidentally forgot to harvest. Just make sure you're taking any sort of thing that's diseased out, or taking any fruits that might throw off seeds and germinate next year. You don't want that either. You also want to make sure that you weed out any germinating weeds. So we do have what we call winter annual weeds. They actually start germinating in the fall, and if you don't get rid of them, what you're going to find when the snow melts away is that they have not this big, they're now this big, and they're going to be a problem for you in the spring. The other things you want to do, say in the other parts of your garden, is make sure that you are clipping back any of your diseased leaves, any of your leaves that have finished out. This is also a good time of the year to plant things. If you find some plant or tree that you really need to have, plant it now, and you might find a good quality plant that may possibly be on sale this time of year. What you don't want to do this year yet is prune your fruit trees. You want to make sure the plants are dormant before you start to prune them out. That's a good thing to do at the very end of the winter. You also want to make sure that you do not fertilize your plants until they go dormant. So for example, if you have trees that you want to fertilize in the fall, you cannot do it now. You have to wait until they have dormant and the climate is a little cooler.
Can you explain a little bit why it is that we don't want to do fertilizing now and get out and do pruning now? Because the weather's great. It'd be nice if we could get out and do those sorts of things. I want to do this in November.
If we only had this all summer long. So what happens if you apply fertilizer or you prune a plant, the plant growth is stimulated. And this is a time of year you want plants to be shutting down, putting all the sugars back into the roots so that they survive the winter. You don't want them to be stimulating upper growth. So this is not the time of year to do that.
Should we be mulching anything, and or is there anything that we can actually be planting in addition to perennials and trees this time of year? Are there any vegetables that are a cool season that we might be able to put in?
Well, mulching is interesting. Sometimes there's plants such as figs that when it's getting to be the winter time, in a couple months from now, you're going to bend them down. You may cover them with some leaves and then wrap them in a canvas so that they survive the winter. Now, the one vegetable that we can't forget to begin to put out and start growing is garlic. In Ohio, we have a very short growing season, so we plant it in the fall. We get roots established, we plant the cloves, and they're individual cloves that we plant, not the full bulb. We cover it with some mulch, straw, and then in the spring we rake that straw off and you'll see a shoot starting to grow.
Now, one of the experience I've had planting garlic is I'll get my nice garlic bed out there, get everything planted, and then 3 hours later I find the chipmunks out there bearing acorns. Is there anything you can do to keep chipmunks and squirrels out of the beds, and more often in the pots, like these nice pots that you put together earlier?
Okay, so chipmunks are a very difficult problem here in the urban settings. Some of the things that we can do are trapping, but I'll tell you, once you trap one, there's 75 more ready to take its place. You can also put out some of the repellents that are kind of the hot pepper spray repellents, the rotten egg smelling sort of repellents. Those last for a little bit of time. And on some of your trees or your pots, you can actually put a silver, like a metal band that they can't crawl up, but they can stretch and get over it. They can jump in from another tree. So I feel for your chipmunk issue. That's very difficult to solve.
Is there anything particular you need to do with tools? I've been using all season, the shovels, my pruners.
So you want to make sure that when you are finished with your tools for the season, that you clean them completely off with soil. This is also a really good time to sharpen them so that when the spring comes along and you're ready to get out there, they are ready to go. Make sure that they're oiled. Your different things like your mechanical equipment, like your tillers, making sure you're doing all the winter preparations that you should usually do on those. You know, either taking out the gas or putting in a gas stabilizer, making sure some of that maintenance that you might want to finish now is done so that in the spring, like I said, you're just ready to get out there and go.
Fantastic. Well, I think I have plenty of things on my list to do when I get home.
You certainly do, and so do I. Thank you for joining us here today, and thank you for being with us with Gardening Conversation. We'd like to thank the Old Brooklyn Development Corporation and the Ben Franklin Community Garden for hosting our show here today. Have a great fall.